to Image in the Infinite, our summer Crossroads event. The experts instructing me. We like to welcome Rita, acclaimed poet and a very good personal friend of all of us here mostly. Rita was born in Rochester and now resides in Brooklyn with her husband Frank and their 2 young children. She received her BA from Hofstra and her MA from Teachers College in Columbia University. For several years she worked as an ESL teacher at the CUNY Circuit of Schools. She's a 3-time winner of the Best Original Poetry category at the annual Catholic Press Association Awards, as well as a winner of numerous 2nd and 3rd place CPA awards, including this year's 2nd place award for Best Original Poetry for her piece entitled Herod's Lament. You can read that tonight, or?
No. Sorry.
Okay, we'll have to buy the books at the back. In 2012, 14 of her poems were featured in the Magnificat Year of Faith Companion, and in 2013, she published her first book of poems, Souls in the City, which is quite astonishing if you haven't read it yet. On a personal note, I think Barbara asked me to make this introduction because Rita and I were roommates in New York in our 20s, having come together after many of our own adventures, which won't be published anytime soon. But I can share with you that Rita's human genius at that time and during those years was really fully evident to me as her friend. Well, not on the domestic front, I would say. I'm having 10 friends for dinner and here's the chicken. But more importantly, in the realm of friendship and connecting, Rita was really in the vanguard among our friends, and I think she still is. But even back then, she was disarmingly fearless and unapologetic in following her need to connect with people and to understand life in a more profound way. This is a rare audacity. I have never met anybody like her since, and it is certainly the driving force and the bright light that shines through all of her work. This has to do with the ability to take risks, and her ability to take risks is probably bolstered up by her certainty in life. And she wouldn't say so, but I see it, and I'm gonna witness it. The risks she takes in her explorations of life and faith and all their mysteries in her poems comes from the strength of the spirit that moves her. I want to say that I discovered Rita because before her books were published, and certainly she's done this for others, she can speak up, but she, for one of my birthdays, which I blotted out here, she gave me this book of meditations on her poems. You probably don't remember.
I don't.
And
what's in there? Oh my goodness.
Well, I don't know if this stuff is published, but maybe I'll put my name on it. No, but this tells you something about Rita, or at least it is better able to articulate how I feel about her and her poetry. The name of this poem is called Mystery's Conception. And I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts. Eternity was small, when sown was God's own seed, not casually cast off beaten paths, but placed with timeless ready care in soil rich by grace prepared. I think that this also describes Rita and her work and her person. She wasn't randomly strewn, but she was strewn among us and among the world, the people of the world, in a way that has enabled us to participate really in a very special way today. I feel like we're fortunate indeed to be together. Tonight's format was really subscribed by Rita. She wanted to open a discussion about creative process, how images evoke poetry and how poetry catalyzes other creative expressions. She'll read her poems, but also in the end for the Q&A, it's a little bit different than usual for Crossroads. She wants to actually hear from us, and she's going to start out with questions of her own that will draw us into a better understanding of what poetry is and actually who we are. I would only ask you to hold your applause when she does her readings. It sort of interrupts the idea of what she wanted to happen. At the end, we will conclude formally, but also just so you know, her books will be on sale, and there'll be plenty of time actually for more discussion privately if you wish. Rita?
Wow.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I'm really shocked. I'm completely floored by that introduction. It's something I never expected. I mean, we do Crossroads in New York. I just get up there and read a piece of paper, and it really makes me think, what it means to really prepare, an introduction. It's just, it's great. I think we can all just like buy the book and go home. It's really great, Suzanne. Thank you. Wow. Such an honor to be here. So many friendly faces and friends for so many years are in this room. So thank you just for coming and showing your faces. It's beautiful just to see you. I want to talk about the image in the infinite. This is an image that was taken by my friend Ted Oberman, and that's his daughter Lily. Some of you might know Lily. You might have met her, some of you, on a recent vacation, but that's when she was a little girl. And this image that he took really struck me, and I was looking at it, I said, gee, when you look at that image, what is striking to you in that image? Anybody could just shout something out if you want. Maybe it's not striking to you.
The tree, the water in the tree.
Okay.
The water?
Yes, the water's very striking.
The bravery of the girl.
Yes, the girl just going there in front of that water. Okay, well anyway, so the picture, the image, I found it very striking. And so I wrote this, Water Lily, because her name is Lily. How to capture the grandeur of gushing water, the power of profusion in a plastic cup. A child will see satisfaction from the surge of a pump. Her tries are born of attraction, not outcome. Here's another picture that my friend Ted took. This is his street in Brooklyn, New York, State Street. And you all remember that long winter that we had. The snow is beauty and burden. Unladen limbs come close. These trees style our stately street, a webbed and wintry home. Anybody know where that is? Yes, okay, that's the fountain, and it's called the Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. And that's the angel who troubles the waters, and people are supposed to go in the waters and get healed. So Ted also, he took this picture. The fall is in our eyes. The angel has come, not to bring peace, but to stir the waters, intensify the golden grip of autumn. The leaves remain, reflecting change. A bird is perched on each unflapping wing. Our blessings well from bronze. We praise the overflow, yet fear to wade or drink. So this is just to show you my creative process always starts with an image. This is a Matilia poppy. These are flowers that are very popular in California. My friend Heather King, took these pictures, and I really was very struck by them. And so I wrote a poem, and then I sent her the poem, and then she did a whole photo story just on the poem. So it's very interesting how you can have just a few short lines to express a whole slew of images. Matilia poppy, the one who beholds is never alone. This flower is a friend. She leads my eyes to golden stare, while billowed petals set my heart to sail in wind, far beyond, far within. Forever we go from here, my friend. I have a friend, Raquel Isaza, some of you know her, she's a painter. And after she read my poetry that I wrote on the 14 Stations of the Cross, she painted images to my poetry. Now my poetry, I took from the images that we're all familiar with of our Lord as he traveled on his way to Calvary. And I didn't want to read all the poems, but I wanted to choose just a few. Those. The first is The Fourth Station. Jesus meets his mother. Stay for just a moment longer. Linger. But the finger of time, the harshness of circumstance, demand us on. It is not finished. Yet the moment, the perfect moment, picked out of misery, is gone. A quick glance, a hand on a shoulder, we move on. Is the moment really gone? The fifth station, Jesus is helped by Simon. And this is, of course, Simon speaking. You, in your need, have brought shame upon me. For I am made to take your place and keep the pace you cannot keep. I'll take what's mine, you take what's yours. These strangers laugh my soul to scorn. I cannot carry on this course. Disgrace, take back your beam. These scoffers scrap my soul to seed. What have you to do with me? Your garment's mud. Your sweat is blood. Your brow is twisted tree. And me, I'm but a passerby who lifts the weight and looks behind, who leaves the space of ridicule but watches as you stumble through. The shame that's yours is mine. I want to move to the 11th station. Something very interesting happened to me after I wrote this poem. Just to tell you how the power of the word. When my husband was in the hospital after his open heart surgery, he had to go in again into the emergency room because of the fluid that was building up in his lungs and around his heart. And that experience of 20 hours in an emergency room in New York City. I don't know what it's like around here, but in New York City, the emergency rooms are really like war zones, like MASH units. So the words of this poem kept coming back to me as I was there with my husband. His body's been stretched to the limitless, wrought iron holding human hands and feet. The inscription claims this attraction is king. The queen accepts. She is strong but not steeled, wounded by nails, her heart to his heel. She fights with him for life, with every labored breath. His flesh is pressed and spasms in her flesh. This child she's born has suffered, will die. Yet the sorrowful mother is blessed to conceive what hatred and haste can't fix on a tree. The kingdom of love is of freedom and seed. The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. When my sister Mary died a couple years ago, she had brain cancer. I wasn't there when she took her last breath. But when my sister Naomi was there, and I was very curious, and I asked her, I said, well, what was it like, when she took her last breath? And she said, you know the moment the soul leaves the body. You know it. I had never seen anybody die before. And So this image of her last breath and the soul leaving the body kind of stayed with me. The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. A sword has slit her soul. His blood is upon us everywhere in shocking overflow. Why have you forsaken me? Rattles and rakes her spine, amplifies an echoing need. It swirls down to a time ago, to its long-awaiting seed. The cry arrives, the spirit flies, salvation is released. Why have you forsaken me? At last he breathes, the flesh implodes. A Savior is conceived. The 13th station, Jesus is taken down from the cross, and I really, really love this image that Raquel painted. So beautiful. What profit is there in killing this man who claimed to be king, who would not save himself, so lifeless he hangs on a beam? He could not save himself, so he must be removed from his post. What profit is there in a body brought down to behold, uncoil his crown, for his mother awaits his kingdom come down to unfold? So these are from my book, Bitterness and Sweet Love. And I just want to read 2 more poems from there. This one is based on one of my favorite stories in the gospel, which is the story of the good thief on the cross. And I always marveled at how this man who was a thief was the first to enter paradise. And you know, our Lord says, unless you become like a little child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And yet, this thief was the first to enter, and so he must have been like a little child. So I thought, you know, what about this man was childlike, you know? So this poem is called The Kingdom of God Belongs to Such as These. O Lord, how well you love the child that died with you the day you died. His body was a man's, like yours. His deeds before were like the man's way on the other side, who could not turn himself towards life except to twist his head and spit terse curses from wrinkled lips. He seemed already old and dead. But that child to your right, who held the place of honor, the place the others wanted, but was not yours to give, with heart of theft and stone made flesh, was stolen from the earth and lifted up to die with you. What made him hope? Rebirth. The needling crown so absolute and stark upon his head, the tenderness in every breath that led your mother's heart through death, the evidence of innocence erect among the damned. Or could he hear within your thirst a plea his heart could understand? His hope could not sustain repose. Salvation hung so close. Dear Jesus, please remember me where thorns turn into gold. So I didn't really put an image up there for that poem, but I would really like for you to try and engage in this process of seeing the image from the words. The last I want to read from this book is called The Killed Calf. This poem was born out of a conversation that I had over many weeks with a friend of mine who was suffering a lot because a wayward brother of hers was sort of coming home, and he had caused a lot of confusion and difficulty to the family. And I really wanted to respond to my friend. How could I help? What words could I offer? And I just sat down and I just wrote this poem. And I offered this poem to her as an answer to her question. It's called The Killed Calf. I had heard the rumors, your fall from grace, how you tossed our father's fortune to the dogs, and now, disgraced and starving, you're making your way home. I am the good son. I fattened the calf in your absence, and now to welcome you, our father says it must be slain. The little cow, so stuffed with grain, teeters on its legs. For mercy's sake, it must be slain. I killed the fattened calf for you, though it tried to get away. Its eyes rolled back inside its head. It seized and cried, so racked with pain. Who will know what price was paid? I am the good son. At our father's word, I killed the calf that could barely stand, for my brother lives. In every welcoming, there is a death. In every homecoming, a hidden sacrifice. In every sacrifice, the Father's will to forgive and live again. Next, I want to read to you some poetry from the Souls in the City. The first poem is called Do You Know This Man? This poem was also written as an answer to a friend who had a very bad day at work. He worked with the homeless on George Washington Bridge in New York City. And one day he came home and called me up and he said, "You cannot believe what a horrible day I had. This guy comes to me every day at the shelter. He was very, very drunk and he was semi-passed out on the bathroom floor. And the cops came to me and said, this guy says, you know, you're his friend, can you come and help us?" And he went into the bathroom and the police were abusing this homeless man. And the guy was saying to him, help me, you know. So he just really felt very helpless in front of this situation. So I wrote this poem for him. Do you know this man? A homeless man seems less a man, trembling on the bathroom floor, half-dressed, yet completely covered with the sins he couldn't shake away. His, mine, yours, those of our forefathers, and the authorities, who whip with harsh profanities, lashing and re-lashing fallen humanity. Unable to rise to protocol, he meekly calls my name. I know this man, I'm forced to say. Not only because every day at my door he sought friendship and alms, some kind of kind word and ears that would hear, nor for his file, upright and thick, a biography written in the voice of the state. But I know this man from long ago, who fell to the horror of hatred's blow, and knowing he would fall again, still fought to balance the beam of sin. I know his struggle, it is my own, yet numb I stand without protest. And thus the wounds that marked him then, they mark me still. For then as now, my name was on his lips. Next, a reticent gift. Please help me was the printed plea that repeated itself from the cardboard while he slept in the heat on the few feet of pavement he took for a bed as grocery carts crashed and folded into each other like a subway overhead. I followed that train into a mirrored magnification of citrus and cool aisles that burst like bubbles, but left me unquenched and still carrying his cardboard request. Cold carbonation on display behind glass proposed a fast answer for $2 cash, keep the change. Yet approaching his figure with bubbles contained, some sense of the sacred gave pause to my gift. There was no one to ask, should I wake him for this? Unless you become like a little child. You know, this is a favorite theme of mine, right? I'm really driving it home this evening, the child theme. Okay, another true story. Those who beg are this city's brood. They can be any age. They may not tell the truth, but they'll never stop asking for what perhaps you won't refuse. They'll stand and they'll wait in doorways, near banks, or underground. They'll catch your glance before it falls. In the company of all, they'll ask. They'll walk the subway cars like halls until they tire and curl themselves to sleep on slotted seats, the Post or Daily News, a pillow rolled beneath to fill their hooded heads with in-your-face images of scandal, crime, accidents, famous names found dead. Today there was a lady, HIV, psychotic, so she said, telling all the drugs she takes, the suicide attempts. She pointed out her spotted skin and told us how she prays. She asked for money, candy, gum, bagels, pretzels, chips. She held us hanging on the train till we let go to give. Her eyes grew wide. She flashed a tooth. My Walkman needs new batteries. Now I can get those too. I spent some time in Italy, in Milan, and that was back in 1999. And one of the things that shocked me was the number of prostitutes on the highway. I don't know what it's like now, but when I was there, just an incredible number of young girls, women, lining the highway. This is called Queen of the Off-Curb Kingdom. Do you know that you are naked? Can you still feel the fall? You stand through every season, surveying the highway with highlighted eyes smeared in headlights' glare. You hold yourself high on heels that poke your paved pedestal, for you know you will be brought down low. You're wanting and waiting, no place else to go. The cars that pass by, you hope will collect you, somehow protect you from standing and waiting too long. With smoldering cylinders sucked on so deeply, like life that gets lit, used up and stamped out. And as long as there's breath, in one day it can happen again and again. And only the sex shops recall what ensues, electrifying your dazed offering to that mysterious off-curb kingdom that never held a diamond before your eyes, that didn't turn to water at sunrise. This next poem is also written about an experience that I had on the subway in Milan. And one thing about Milan, at least back in 1999, is that you really don't find any fat people there. I don't know what it's like now. But at that time, I was like the fattest person around for miles. Until this happened. Okay, this is called The Space No One Could Fill. My first thought, even before suffering the expansion of heat from that box of stale air, call it metro or subway or metropolitana, as they do here, was to find a place where I would feel less heat, less stress, preferably off my feet, with less sweat in the clothes I'd pressed just 20 minutes before. My thought was shared by all who stood and looked in longing at a half-taken space invaded by the greatness of a young woman's thigh, who in vain kept trying to compress herself so as not to be more than anyone else. She felt the eyes of the entire world on the flesh she could neither shrink nor hide. Would be nice to sit down, I thought to myself. I would like you to sit, her whole face replied. But the space is too small. I can see with my eyes. No, the space is too great. I could see in her eyes. Okay. I really love trees. I write a lot of poetry about trees. This one is called Prune Tree in Mid-May. And this one I wrote just while I was sitting there watching my boys play baseball. Wasn't that exciting of a game, I guess. But Prune Tree in Mid-May, I mean, that kind of says it all, right? For those of you who know anything about trees and gardening, okay, May is not really the time you prune a tree. This tree has lost its leaves, twigs all clipped. It sticks the air in fruitless symmetry. While all the others shimmer green, this one stands with knobby hands to twist the fall of spring. Baldness always shocks the eye, but on a tree, it poses death. Brown bones against the sky. Something that New York and Washington share in common is, of course, the events of 9/11, the loss that we all suffered, our cities. And this poem I wrote thinking about after the event had happened, right after the event. It's called After the Fall. In the silence, we are dust. One figure like the other, covered in powdered steel, disoriented in an altered world, wading through paper and ash to begin the aftermath. The twin temples have been destroyed. The skyline has been crossed. Where is the temple that can fully restore? Where is the gain for our loss? We are given a sign that marks what remains in the rubble and ruin of our age, a steel cross, a sore spot, and our only consolation. Consigned to a corner, its beams still sting our eyes. We are dust. We walk indistinguishable till we lay down our lives. Something else that our cities shared in common was Hurricane Sandy. The devastation was unbelievable. And one of the most tragic stories that I heard of the events of what happened to people in Hurricane Sandy was the story of a woman by the name of Glenda Moore from Staten Island who panicked and took her two little kids in her SUV and was driving, and the water was just getting higher and higher, and she panicked. She opened the car door. She had her two kids, and then the water just took them away. And when I heard that story, it was all over the news. I just thought, I can't imagine such a horror. How could I possibly console this woman if I were to come face to face with her? I have two children of my own, I can't even imagine. So I wrote this poem called Consolation. Washed away in waves, I let my children go. All my hope, my heart, my soul, my life was in my grasp. As if a hand could hold what nature on demand explodes too much, too soon, too fast. I cannot close the gaping gap. I will not be consoled. These waves that crash and crush and slap and slit my every nerve, this stinging salt, this sandy surge is all my fault. How could it be? I will not be consoled. My baby's body's reft of soul. I cannot help but love what's lost. Carried off, the cost, the cost. My past is present, throbbing penance. I let my children go. I will not be consoled until, with elevated reach, my children wake in glowing tide to open wide and welcome me. Another hurricane, which was not as dramatic as Hurricane Sandy, was Hurricane Floyd. This was back in 1999, September of 1999. And this poem is called In Floyd's Path. This kind of merges the two themes of hurricane and begging. It was the night of Floyd, the hurricane, who seemed to make things turn up strange, like a black man in a white neighborhood, waving a closed umbrella in the rain. I did not want to see him cry. I said it was water running down the windshield, wipers lashing at the lie. Wasn't he just asking for the time? Couldn't I just give him the time? I cracked my window so he could hear me say 12:30 and speed away. But he wanted to tell me his name was Paul. He'd been standing 4 hours in the rain, 4 hours of no one stopping at all, where everything had broken down. The van he said he owned to transport the elderly to a nursing home, and the phone on the corner, out of order, like his face that pleaded, guilty or not. I couldn't say, I didn't know. I looked around, no vehicle, yet something surely had broken down and left him frantic and alone, with an urgent, surging stress unknown. Wasn't he just asking for the time? Didn't I just give him the time? I rolled my window down halfway and gave him all my holy cards, then all my change, and a wad of bills I'd stashed away in the depths of my purse for a rainy day. Still he begged and cried for something more. I had to say, I'm sorry, Paul. I'd done all I could, which was nothing at all. No words, no actions could halt the lashing, the endless asking, the hurricane. He blessed me as I drove away. After all this rain, there's got to be a rainbow. Okay. This is something I think most of us can relate to. How many times we have an argument and we think we're right, and that's all we can think about is how we're right. Rainbow. We were having our Friday night fight, accompanied only by R&B, always louder than I'd like, as we drove uptown, slotted inside 3 teeming lanes, the gray sky all the while spraying fall rain, as it had been for days and days and days. The car stops and starts to the R&B cool, the you I can't break. I stew with stretched nerves. You're wrong, 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 wrong. Mind stuck in replay. It's almost over, is all you say. And archways unleashed in the sun and the blues and the tapering rain. Finally, I saved this poem for last. Some of you who I've known for many years, well actually Luigi Tanzi was the first person who invited me to go to Goldberg's Pizzeria. And there he is sitting in the back. And the great thing about poetry is it captures a memory and something that you can keep, you can always have. And unfortunately, I feel that these words are inadequate to the experience, but let's give it a try. Goldberg's Pizzeria. It wasn't the words that were said that won me the first time I rediscovered you. It was air. The air between our bodies, the air in the words we pushed out, the air in the pockets of dough that puffed the crust like a pillow on a pizza bed. But most of all, it was the air that swirled in the hilarity of being together, all together, splitting our sides in a Jewish pizzeria on the aisle's east side. Thank you. I'm really curious about those poems that Suzanne's got so tight to her chest there.
They're very valuable right now.
So this is another photo that my friend Ted took, and I thought it was cute, you know, a bubble for your thoughts. So if anyone would like to maybe share, if you have questions or if you have images or, you know, some kind of a response, you know, some kind of a reflection on poetry.
You took the picture?
That's Ted Oberman. Regina.
What's your favorite poem that you wrote?
Out of what? Out of these 2 books?
Uh-huh. Or your most favorite that you've ever written, and why?
Oh, Lord have mercy. I think it's in that bundle that Suzanne's got.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
I really like The Killed Calf a lot. I like that poem a lot. I like the Simon, helps Jesus carry the cross. I love that one. I like certain lines from the poems, like when I explained how I was in the hospital with my husband, his arms have been stretched to the limitless, and that's the phrase that kept coming back to me, because you're stretched to the limit, but there's still someplace you gotta go after that, right? So the limit becomes the invitation, the possibility, Yes, Andrea?
What struck me in so many of the poems is just the keen awareness you have of all the aspects of life. I mean, I'm not talking about intellectually, but when you experience everything, just the clarity of each memory and the sensations and things and feelings. I mean, so there are two questions. When you write one of these poems, do you usually write it right after something has struck you? Or do you have, or if you write it much later, how do you maintain that really acute awareness of so much of life, of sensation and everything? I mean, because there are times when I go through my morning, I'm on automatic pilot. If somebody said precisely what did I experience in the last few minutes, I'd go, I don't know, whatever. So do you understand what I mean?
Yes. I usually write most of my poems right after they happen, soon after, I think, or sometimes as they're happening. I look for, the title of this talk is The Image and the Infinite. So, I think that part of the education that I've received over the years through our companionship is to look for what lasts in the passing moment. To try and, I also actually like the poem of, when Jesus meets his mother, to just linger, and then the moment's gone. Is it really gone? It's not really gone. And yes, Suzanne?
So just to get back to your idea, to give you some feedback on the images, that was actually a question I had for you, which is that actually, my feeling about that picture is it's kind of sad in its finiteness, because we know what's going to happen to that bubble. Whereas with the people, you feel much more of a trajectory of the future, I guess, even if that's not necessarily the case. So I guess, based on that meditation, I would wonder, is your poetry, or is poetry in general, an attempt actually to capture what is finite? This is very beautiful, right? But we know, in 30 seconds, there's going to be a kid, with a jump rope and it's gone. So, I want to understand better, the infinite in these expressions of finiteness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question.
Sorry.
The poems would be so dead, without being able to somehow capture the mystery. Even in that simple and kind of silly poem about Goldberg's Pizzeria, when I said, what was it? It was air. How do you explain that? There's something that permeates everything, that gives it life, that gives it breath, animates. And if you don't see that, I don't know, if I don't see that, then I don't really have a contribution to make at all. I don't think. I wouldn't write poetry. It would be utterly boring for me. Yes?
What do you do with the gap between the experience you can kind of articulate in a poem versus the experience itself? Because you're saying with the pizzeria example, there's clearly an experience that's had, and you can sort of doctor it up and make it fancy and make it sound cool in a poem, and yet there's so much that you still can't really describe. So like, what is your, I don't know, do you feel limited in that sense? You're talking about limitation before.
Yes.
Do you feel, like, what is the value of poetry in that sense? You can't really describe everything in its totality.
Well, you leave spaces. I mean, that's why I love poetry more than anything else, because it has spaces in it that the reader can fill, that I can't fill all the spaces. I can't. I wouldn't want to. The person, you need to have space for another to enter that. You know, that's why Jesus spoke in parables, to give space for our freedom. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question.
So then I guess, like, what is the space you're describing? What is that? I mean, if it's is it different for everyone? What is that exactly?
It's the way, it's the place for you to enter in relationship with the meaning of what's ever being given there. If there's no space, let me see if I can help you with this one. Let me see. This is a nice little poem, very short. It's called, no, sorry. It's an unpublished poem that I'm thinking about.
What's it called?
Let me see if I can remember it. What is there in the space between a saint's gaze and the infant's face? I was looking at a statue of St. Anthony of Padua, you know how, almost like Ramon sitting there, and you know, because you look like St. Anthony today. And I was just looking at the gaze of St. Anthony on that baby, and I just said, what is there in the space between a saint's gaze and the infant's face? What is it? You know, I mean, that's for all of us to answer, right? What is there in the space between me and Sue, looking at each other right now? Like what is that? You know, that I wouldn't want to put a label on it. I almost couldn't, but I like saying that. It somehow makes me happy to pose that question. I think it's an exciting question to pose. Yes, Maddie?
Then I don't want to make you put a label on it, but I'm really interested in how being a poet affects the different relationships that you have in your life. You mentioned that you were an ESL teacher, that you have children. How does being a poet change that gaze that you have, particularly on the people around?
Well, I mean, first of all, I never really thought of myself as a poet until like quite recently. I don't think you deserve to call yourself a poet. It's such a big name, you know. It's like you really got to earn that title, you know. And when people used to call me a poet, I would get really embarrassed. Because if people have certain expectations of a poet, and I thought I couldn't fill those expectations. It was really embarrassing, actually. And Kathy's laughing because she's known me since college, and she's like, yeah, she ain't no damn poet. She's a big fake. I'm kidding. Yeah, so, I mean, okay, you know what, Maddie, I'll answer that question. I'll tell you what. I was not born a poet, I don't think. I don't think that I didn't aspire to be a poet, let's put it that way. But I discovered when I started writing poetry that if I did not have the heart of a child, which is what I always insist upon, then I couldn't really create anything. I really felt that it has a lot to do, like, so what I do in my life in order to write poetry is I really guard my heart. I try to confess my sins, to not hold grudges against people, to have an openness to, I mean, a purity of heart, I think, is needed to really be able to see something and to see the mystery in that. So that's what, because if I'm having a fight with my husband, I can't sit down and write a poem. I just can't. Some people can. I can't. Because that avenue, because then I have to go, leave my gift at the altar and say sorry to my brother. Because it doesn't make sense to write a poem when you're holding a grudge against your brother or your sister or your neighbor. I mean, that's just the way that I look at it, you know, because I have to have a pure heart, or I'm not able to write. Oh, I'm scared of this one. Okay, yes, your name, sir?
Hubby.
Yes, Mr. Hubby.
I'd just like to make a comment. Obviously, she's written a lot of poems, so that means we don't fight that much. But secondary is, you know, you think when somebody writes a poem that they're sitting in quiet with nobody disturbing them, and they're able to sit with their thoughts and ponder all these beautiful poems and stuff. You know, I know it's the same thing over and over again, but to see what she does, worrying about me being sick all the time, the children constantly harassing her, and no matter what she does, she has very little sleep. She feeds us, she takes care of all of us, and then she surprises me, like at night. She'll come in and say, I wrote this poem today, and I'm like, where did she have time to write a poem? Now she's got books. And you know, I mean, it's an amazing thing when God touches a person, because it doesn't follow the normal thought process of how it appears to you. It gets done somehow or the other. And I'm not a poet. I'm not a guy that sits down and brings out books. Oh, well, this is the greatest poetry I've seen, and you know. But she'll come into the room and she will read these poems to me. And usually I'm watching the Yankee game at the time when she wants to read the poem to me. But I listen, and that takes a lot of power to get me from a Yankee game to read poetry. And I'm really amazed. You know, I'm amazed at how someone can do this, something so beautiful, through all this turmoil that she's going through. You know, I know I'm part of it. And then she's got, you know, she'll say, I'm dedicating this to my husband. And it touches me to my heart to even experience this. You know, and I know that there's a presence that has to be present in order for her to be able to express this in the way that she does and how she does. And I just wanted, you know, as your husband, even though I'm biased as heck, you know, I want to thank you, because I was sick. I really didn't want to come down to Washington, D.C. I wanted to stay home. But I love my wife so much, and her poetry is good. If it wasn't good, then I would have stayed. You know, but I'm very happy that I came and to honor a person that could do something like this and can be something to me. I'm looking for something. I'm always looking for something of how God or how Jesus is going to touch my heart in a special way. And I'm looking far. And I just found out that where I'm looking, it's right there, right in front of me. You know, and I experienced that tonight. So I just wanted to thank you for what you do for everyone.
Unless, I don't know if somebody has another question. Yes, sorry.
So I'm always amazed by the kind sounds and puts them together in a way that just like makes sense. So I'm wondering, partly in your process, do you sort of hear the words, do you speak them out loud as you're writing them down? And part of that, like, do you often edit? It seems like these just kind of straightforward.
Sometimes I do hear the words. I hear them. Sometimes it just comes right out. The one who beholds is never alone, that one, right? Oh, I think I lost one. The flower one. Oops. Anyway. But that one came, just flowed out like water. Sometimes you get one of those, and that's real nice, you know. And then other times you spend days on one word. I spent days on one word, you know. So, but then you know when it's right. You just okay, you know, that's it. That's right, you know. So, yeah. Did I answer all the questions?
I mean, if you could just talk a little bit more about, like, how do you decide when a word needs to be open and when it needs to be crisp? And, like, the balance of the way the words sound, coming from a musical perspective.
Well, I mean, there's alliteration and assonance I use a lot in my poetry. I like to kind of connect the vowel sounds a lot of times. That to me makes smooth transitions. And sometimes I'll write something and I won't even know what it means. And I'll say, gee, I don't like that. It sounds funny. It sounds weird. And then I'll read it to a friend of mine, and she's, oh, don't change that. That's the best line. You know. So sometimes strange things come out, you know, and there's a lot of risk involved, you know, especially when you write things and you're not exactly sure, you know, what that means. But I know that other poets do that because I've asked them. Have you ever written something you really know? Oh, yeah, I've done that, you know. So, but you put it there because of the way it sounds. You like the way it sounds. It fits. And I'm not saying I don't know what the words mean, but I don't know, like, I mean, I know the general feeling of it, the general sense of it. And a lot of times it comes back to me, and then later I understand what it means. So that's very exciting when that happens. Yes?
Who are some of your favorite poets?
I like Robert Frost. He was the first poet that I loved. When I was in 10th grade, my teacher read Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. I just thought, that is just great. You know, the fact that there's this story of this man who goes into a woods and then there's something underlying that, you know, it's really, I could feel the mystery really vibrating in that poem. And it was great because Robert Frost, you go outside, you look at a tree, you know, you look at a brook, you know, you look at a forest, and you don't really have to have a lot of knowledge, of literary knowledge, and I like that about him. Then on the other hand, T.S. Eliot, you have to have a lot more knowledge to really, you know, understand what he's saying, but I think I like T.S. Eliot also. I like Lucille Clifton. Have you ever read Lucille Clifton? She's an African-American poet. I think she passed away a couple of years ago, maybe in 2010 or something. Very simple. I like more simple poetry. I don't, anything that I have to really work at it, it's too hard for me. You know, as my husband says, I got a lot to do, so. Yes, Father.
From what you describe, it seems that when you write, just like you build a sort of unity, or you recognize a unity between soul and mind and eyes and ears and everything. Would it be the same thing in order to enter into poetry? That it's like either you look for this unity or you live this unity, and so you are able to kind of become one with it, or it should just strike you, and well, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't.
I'm not a great literary critic. A lot of poetry that people really love, I just don't understand it.
So I'm not the only one. You know, I think, so I don't really know what is the best way, you know, to approach a poem. I mean, I think, I really don't even, I don't know how to answer that question, because I'm so limited myself in that department. I mean, I do read poetry, I like poetry, but it's hard for me. It's a work. But writing poetry for me is not. It's hard work. It's really, you know, reading and trying to understand. But I do feel that as time goes on, I'm starting to understand it better. What's helped me is to realize that you don't have to understand everything. I mean, when we go to Mass and when we're in front of the Eucharist, and that's such an incredible mystery, yet we can be so in love at that moment, you know, just participating in that gesture. But to really understand that sacrifice and that, you know, so I think maybe it's kind of like I mean, something has to strike you. Some word, some phrase has to strike you. And I think to start from that, to start from what strikes you, and then, you know, because once something strikes you, then you're more interested in trying harder to get the whole picture there. So I think, you know, I guess I would say it like that. You know, yes.